you all. Now that your bellies are happier, and hopefully your hearts and your souls feel a little bit happier as well from the stories that we shared tonight and the inspiring words. Maria's and my intention for this next part was really, if anyone had questions or thoughts that came up for you as you were listening to some of the storytellers or our poet, that we want to give you the opportunity to ask or share. And then we also have some other kind of prompts to think about, but if we just want to start, does anybody have anything that came up for them as you were listening, or any questions that you are curious about?
I think it's important that our spiritual stories overlap no matter our traditions, right? There are different stories about relationships with parents. There are different stories about God speaking, and so those differences are actually our common ground.
Thank you. Did you want to share your thoughts on all that?
Sure. That's a good segue into Laura and I were kind of just talking about that, because when we put the stories together and everything, we didn't really notice that most, and because a few people couldn't make it tonight, all of our stories were Christian-based stories and God-based stories, and that's not necessarily the definition of a spiritual experience. And I myself am not religious, but I am very, very spiritual, and I'm spending a lot of time in religious spaces because that's where people that are spiritual tend to be. But I have had a lot of spiritual experiences and a lot of experiences with that voice talking, but I don't identify that voice or those experiences as Christian experiences. I don't identify that voice as God, but I think it's the same thing. And so I felt like that was an important thing to note, too, for those of you who may not share that same background as all of our speakers tonight. Yeah, John.
I was just going to say, could you speak a little bit about that voice in relation to your poems? It's so important to a poem. It's, voice, of course, is important when we tell stories, but ultimately there's a narrative surrounding whatever it is we're representing. It's not necessarily the case in a poem. I was just kind of curious. It's something I was thinking about in relation to speaking all of these stories, because mine actually was the only one that wasn't really God-based either. In fact, I am a spiritual person in a lot of ways, but I don't belong to any religious tradition.
Yeah.
So it's curious that the two poets are
very funny.
Spiritual
right.
people.
That's I'm sure by no accident or something. But I feel like what might be identified as God shows up a lot in my work personally, and I experience that mostly through connection with nature, which your poems also touched on. I hear that a lot from people in all different backgrounds and traditions, that nature is a vessel for that kind of connection, and for me that is like incredibly intense, and I hear those voices often through something like the ocean or the moon or trees, or my poem that I'm going to read tonight is about a sycamore tree, and I often use that voice when I write lately, and you know this because you've been editing some of my weird poems that have been coming out in the last year. It comes out in italics, so I've been using that italics voice to kind of convey that more spiritual call and response to some sort of petty argument I'm having with the world or with myself, and using italics to insert that kind of spiritual voices. I assume that's what you were trying to
I wasn't thinking of the italics per se, but actually that it kind of, I think we had sort of been talking about those poems, put a finger on that whatever was happening in the italics, I remember saying to you, over the summer, I don't know what's going on with these, you don't know, but let's keep doing it, let's figure out what it's doing. And it did seem like it was another voice kind of pushing up against the more conscious voice that was otherwise on the page in the non-italicized section.
Yeah, and I think that's what those spiritual voices often are, is a subconscious voice pushing up against our conscious egos that are, having all kinds of feelings or thoughts or whatever. So, yeah, anyway, that's all she wrote.
One of the things that I've thought about, I was thinking about for myself coming into this event tonight, because Maria had said, would you consider sharing? And I said, if we need me to share a story, I'll tell a story. But I was thinking to myself, my story might seem really insignificant and small, But I think also what I heard tonight in the different stories was that for some people, they heard God through, a gift of $30,000, and for others it was a smile in a drive-through window. And so that idea that like God is present in these really big ways, but also in these really small ways, and I think that is something that I don't know, that really resonates and speaks to me, because I think sometimes we're looking for the really big things, and that's the only way that we're going to recognize or hear or see God, or however we imagine the divine kind of interfering in our lives. But really it's in lots of little small ways all the time. So, yes.
Thinking about both of this conversation about spirituality outside of a religious tradition or concept of God, and what you were just saying, Laura, and it thought to me, one of the things that I always think of with spirituality more broadly is this understanding that there's something greater than us. And that what I heard in all of these stories is somehow there was something beyond our own feelings or mind or wants or the way that we were taken up with a problem. And somehow there was something greater than us working or moving and acting in that situation. Whether you call it God, whether you don't call it God, whether it's part of the natural reality of our universe or whatever it is, that somehow there's something at work that can take us out of our own issues and our own perspectives on those issues. Whether it's us, or I love the story with you felt like it was your dad kind of also was able to come out of what how he might have normally reacted, right? But that we're open to these possibilities, that something can move us in a new way and help us see somebody or something or engage with people in new ways. And yeah, we can call that God, but you don't have to call that God, as long as we recognize that we're not everything, and our own feelings and thoughts aren't going to control everything about it. There's something else at work. So.
I wonder if there have been moments in your own life that you came tonight with those moments in mind where God spoke to you, or you felt like you really had a spiritual encounter of some kind, or if listening to these stories again kind of brought something up in you and you're like, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it with a different mindset, maybe this was really God moving or Spirit moving in my life. And I wonder if anyone else had an experience that they want to share.
Can I share, Laura?
Please, Nikki.
It's typical of me.
Just have a week, it doesn't matter.
We can are you sure? I think we can get it in a sec too. That would be better. Yeah. Because otherwise I'm going to be like, ah! So I feel it's interesting that everyone talked about like God speaking to them in words, because I experience God most profoundly in images. And this was something that I came to a couple years ago. Because I was a pretty religious person, I went to Mass almost every day. I'm a Catholic. And I was very connected to that divine reality and felt God very profoundly in my life, and felt often like God was speaking to me, even if not in tangible words, but rather in emotion and prayer, when you come to these small reflections or epiphanies or ways that help you see better. And I went through a really, really tough time in my life. And that relationship to me had been severed. This thing that I had relied on, that I could connect with, it seemed like there was this void, or there was this abyss, that God wasn't there for me anymore. And I would pray and I would try to reach out, and I would construct, I thought in my head, a false God, this false thing that I was trying to reach out and connect to in my desperation, because the real thing wasn't accessible to me. It was like there was this wall and everything was just lost. And that was really difficult for me. And as the years It wasn't like years. It was like months. I don't know. and during those months, sometimes I would reach out and I would get this image of a tree in my head whenever I would try to think of God. And I would just have this image of this tree all the time. And at some point, I went to the Sisters of Charity have a campus in Bardstown. And I was going on like a meditative hike through the woods there because I'd been on a retreat there and I had returned. And as I was going on this hike, I got to a tree and I looked at it, and it was the tree that had always been in my head when I thought of God. And now, of course, it's sort of probably like a little coincidental, I'm not like that superstitious really, but also there was something meaningful to me that was the tree that I thought I had seen in my head when I thought of God. And it made me realize that, sometimes God is, even though we can't see God or God seems lost to us, God is still with us in our suffering. And to not be able to talk to God is in itself an experience of God. The absence of God is an experience of God. And although it didn't fully heal the spiritual difficulties I was going through, I was just looking at that tree and feeling connected to it and sitting underneath it. And there was just this rush of peace in me. And I realized I didn't have to be as Catholic as I thought I needed to be with God. It could just be me and this tree. And so I go visit that tree sometimes and sit underneath it and pray to it and journal underneath it. And I know that is where God is with me. So that's my story.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
All right, so I've been here 11 years, and when I got here, there was one Bible study on campus. It was the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and it was very athlete. Do you know what I mean? I'm a nerd, I don't athlete. So, I cut the grass. That's about as athletic as I get. And so, it's good. I spoke with them and I worked with them, but I was like, man, I would really like to see more, just little groups meeting together and talking about the Bible, because I'm a Protestant. And so I was praying, and I prayed for 4 years, and then BCF popped up, and they were like, you want to be our, faculty mentor? And I was like, heck yeah, man, I'm in, I'm all in. And I talked to the guy who started it, and he was like, yeah, 4 years ago, I started a Bible study in my apartment, and it got too big, so we had to move to Hillary's to do it. So, just because you don't see results right away, don't give up. Jesus says that. If you're a Christian, I'm just saying, Jesus says, keep pestering, just keep going, keep asking. And so it was really wild for me in my faith to hear him say that he started it 4 years ago when I started praying for it. So, anyway.
I want to speak to images a little bit, because if you want to take that one step further, dreams, right? Dreams can be very spiritual, and this might jump in a little bit on Sean's story, because it's also about our relationship. But so when we were dating, we were in college, we were at a distance from my family, and it was hard for him to meet everyone. And he never actually met my maternal grandmother. And so we got married in 99. And in November of 98, my grandfather was diagnosed with colon cancer, and he died that Christmas break. And so Sean never got to meet him. And he basically barely made it out of the house. He was just one of those stubborn old men who was like in the service and would not go to the doctor, like that was that generation. And my dad barely carried him out, and he was gone within a couple days. And this is a house that I grew up in a lot of ways. Like every day after school, that's where I was. I mean, we're talking tired yellow carpet that was never vacuumed. I never saw my grandmother vacuum it. We're talking like probably 700 pictures in frames all tangled together and falling on one another. We're talking touch lamps from the 80s. That was this house, and nothing ever changed my entire growing up, including from childhood and into college when we were together. And so he never knew this house, but it knew me, right? So when our wedding came, and I won't be romantic and say it was the night before, it was definitely within the week or two before, I had a dream. And in that dream, I was racing in my car, because I never drive fast. And I was racing in my car to get back to that house, to pick up a veil, which I didn't have a veil in our wedding. Of course, that's how dreams work. And as I was running into the house, like through this nasty front porch that I think fell off in the last storm before my grandmother left, and through this like old, cracked, splintered wooden door with that stupid diamond window thing in it at the top, every product of the 70s and 80s, I was running through that nasty living room and over that yellowed carpet, and probably hitting the 80s touch lamps in the way because I was rushing so fast, because I had it in my head that the veil was on the kitchen table, which was the next room after the living room. And I ran into the kitchen and I grabbed it and I turned around, and my grandfather was standing in the living room. And he didn't say anything to me. He just looked at me and he just nodded his head. And he was telling me it was okay and that he approved of Sean, even though they never met. And so, yeah, I just wanted to note that dreams, that we get peace through dreams. I mean, of course, there's turmoil in dreams as well, but like God or spiritual experiences occur in dreams. And I thought that carried over well from what you were saying, and the house still impacts me today. I mean, I just had a poem published in Leo Weekly about that house, and this year's Leo, literary Leo. So yeah, the house doesn't leave me. But yeah, I thought that was worth noting.
That kind of made me think, like the divine can speak through images. That's happened to me, and also for me, like through music. That made me think of when I was around 11, and my family and I lived on this farm that had really been a staple part of my growing up, and it was just really important to me and my family. And then my dad got a job offer in Louisville, so we lived in southern Indiana, and we had to move. But it was a really difficult decision for our family, and we just had a lot of. I was only 11. I didn't really necessarily understand everything that was going on, and I just felt like something was being torn away. And in that time, we would be driving in the car, and this song kept coming up on the radio. We had never heard it before, and I never really heard it on the radio afterward. I don't know if anyone knows the song Home by Philip Phillips. I don't know, but that song kept coming up, and it said I'll make this place your home. And that to me, it was just, it felt like God was saying to me it's okay. I'm going to take care of you. And it was really a lifeline at that time. So, and I've been really happy here in this new place we live. So I guess that was just through music, I feel God is able to like speak to me and bring confidence.
Hi, so my name's Stephanie and I'm a nursing major. It's my sophomore year, so I'm taking this med-surg clinical. And it's crazy, it's really crazy. Medical surgical unit, a lot of chaos, a lot of patients with different like heart problems and like after surgeries and stuff. And I wasn't very fond of it at the beginning of the year. I was not looking forward to it, waking up at 5 in the morning and getting ready for this clinical. It was very disgusting for me because a lot of vomit, diarrhea, bodily fluids everywhere. And I was just like, I don't even know if I want to be a nurse because this is not what I want to do, you know, for the rest of my life. But that quickly changed. I've experienced God more through that clinical. I've been able to share, you know, my love for God through that clinical and just like, you know, changed my heart. It really did change my heart because I was there like not really ready to like clean up, you know, really nasty stuff. But, you know, as I was cleaning this one patient who was there for alcohol withdrawal, I was with a friend, we were helping him, you know, clean him up and everything. And so I was like, I'm gonna pray. And so I started praying as I cleaned him up. And it was really eye-opening because there are people who in this life are struggling with a lot and you don't know. And sometimes, you know, just as I was cleaning him, he was talking about his life and everything. And, you know, just being there, being able to love that person for who they are, and to be able to just be there and enlighten their day, lighten up their day, and share that love, that they are loved, that they are worthy, that they should not be considered less than anything. And it just really changed my perspective with nursing. And so I've been able to experience, you know, God's love through the patients that I've worked with. And sometimes it's been hard to work with those patients, but at the same time, I'm learning in theology about like agape love. It does not want anything in return. It's a love that is just given freely, that has like the interest of the other person. And so, you know, throughout the stress of the semester and everything, I've just been able to love people and experience God's love and being able to share his love.
It's about that time, so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. But thank you all so much for all sharing your really beautiful stories, those of you who signed up to do it and those of you who didn't. I feel like we got a lot of richness here, and the serendipity of that is a really beautiful thing, because the Spirit does move you, right, to share all of your stories. So would you look at that? Oh, right.